Welcome back to the Skid Factory. Today we're going to have a look at Pete's Volvo station wagon. This is a 1989 Volvo 240 GL station wagon. The car was originally bought by Az from Dunning-Kruger Motorsport back in 2012, I think it was, and built in the Skid Factory OG style, back when we used to just do stupid things for the fun of it. It's sporting a unconventional engine. There's no Volvo red block in there or crusty PRV V6. It's got something good under the bonnet, so let's have a look. Resplendent red, the best. This is a very old 1UZ. I believe it was originally out of a Crown, which is the first of the 1UZs. Aaron, I don't know, he bought it, it was in a paddock somewhere upside down, I think. And we had this brilliant idea of putting it in a Volvo, and the basic idea came from our mate Timmy's Datsun Bluebird that has a Nissan V6 turbo in it. We used to go to Power Cruise, and the Bluebird was beige, and it used to be pretty quick, and it would win a lot of races, and it was quite embarrassing for people with fast cars that got beaten by a beige car. So we tried to think of a car that would be more embarrassing to be beaten by than a beige Bluebird, and of course a beige Volvo station wagon was the obvious choice. We had to make a custom sump for it, or when I say we, I mean Matt, who is always the guy that has to do the hard work. We just sit around drinking lemon squash and pointing and saying we should get Matt to do that, and he always comes through for us, so thanks Matt. The sump is still going strong, mint. We mounted it in on some custom mounts, which is the usual thing, just the old Shacklebush setup, homemade brackets. It fits in there really well, actually. We dumped it right back against the firewall as we tend to do, which is the right spot to put it, but it also makes it a pain in the ass to work on, but you get that. We don't think about that until later. And I've just changed the engine over to a fresh engine just recently, in the last week, and I was punished for my former sins. I got to find out how difficult it is to get the engine out when it's in this form. I probably should have taken the gearbox out first, but you get that, and it's all in there again, so we're all good to go. We'll have a bit of a look around and see what's going on under this Volvo. Looking over this a few years after, many years after we built it in the first place, I'm sort of reminded of a few things that we did. We replaced the brake booster with, looks like a hot rod booster, like a very small in diameter but triple diaphragm setup. From memory, I don't think it was too difficult to fit either. It's maybe a couple of new holes drilled in the firewall. Obviously the engine, to get the engine back as far as we wanted it, we needed to encroach on the space of the booster, so that's been doing the job. These things got plenty of brake on them for what they are. They've got 4-spot front calipers and 2 rear, I think. The engine management is an old Haltech Sprint 500, which was a cracker of a thing. We used to use them on everything. They're like the size of a cigarette packet, and they do work. They're very minuscule, like there's not many ins and outs, but the control is there, just like every other version of the Haltech ECU. Since been replaced by the Elite 550. So it was the granddaddy of the Elite 550, which also does a great job running these. We use one of those on the Fairlane, which is basically sporting the exact same setup as this, other than the turbo being slightly different. We've got a remote oil filter, and that was actually factory on this engine. The Crown engine had a weird setup with a remote oil filter because it had a silly chassis that stuff didn't fit on properly. So we've just unbolted it off the side of the engine and welded some stuff onto it and welded stuff onto the outlet off the block. Put some lines on it. The turbo oil feed comes from the from the same housing. It's all mounted up there. You can get at the oil filter really easy, and also make a hell of a mess when you take it off, which is always a good thing. Coils, LS1, good value, cost bugger all, big spark. We don't use cam sensor on this, same as the Fairlane. It's got a 36-2 off a later model VVTi engine, so we just use one trigger. That's why there's nothing on the front of the engine here. This would have had distributors and crank angle sensors and leads going everywhere back when it was originally, when it was a Toyota engine, not a Lolvo engine. So we've deleted all that and simplified things a fair bit. It used to look really nasty when we got it here last week, and we couldn't bear it, so we, pulled out the cans of Wrinkle Red and gave it a once over. Now it looks pretty schmick. It's like a rat with a gold tooth. Obviously, a stock 1UZ from 1989 is not going to light any fires as far as performance goes, so we always, add a turbo or two, and that does the job. These things are very strong engines that's from factory. You don't need to do much at all to them to pick up some power. You double the factory power pretty easily with some boost. This is a GT4088. From memory, I think we got this off Clayton's 190E Mercedes V12 project after it broke the rods, I think. Aaron's had a few of these turbos over the years, but I don't remember where this one came from, but it does the job anyway. It's a 106 rear GT4088 Garrett. It's got some generic wastegate on it there, and it's obviously plumbed back to atmosphere. When we built this, we didn't know where to put the turbo because there's such a wide engine, there's no way for the exhaust to get it back out again. So, like to re-enter, to go back under the car through the chassis rail. So we said, oh, we'll just stick it under here, it'll be sweet. We mounted it a bit too low, and then we had to put a sort of a scavenge system on it. And surprisingly, it works pretty good. No dramas, unless you forget to turn the pump on. Then of course it causes problems, but it's all fine as long as everything works properly. It's got a 3-inch exhaust. It sort of exits through here, and that's probably, that's the main reason why the turbo's here, is because we can get the exhaust out underneath the engine mount and the headers and that sort of thing. But if we put the turbo up high, we couldn't actually get the exhaust out without cutting holes in things. So we did revisit this design when we did Woody's Cressida later on, and knowing that we needed to mount the thing up higher to be able to get so it didn't need a pump to drain it, we actually, thought about it before we started and got it up higher so it could drain back into the sump properly. And that was also the same turbo as this, but slightly larger compressor. Does the job. Here's the beautiful matte custom sump, aluminium. I think it's got a 5/8 inch pan rail. It's got baffles and everything inside. It's all pretty fancy. Matt does like to do a nice job when we ask him to do something. Suction pump out of this. This is a bulb off a Commodore air conditioning line. I think it's like a noise suppressor or something. I just got one of them from Old Cox and made that into the drain. That's like the little sump, and then it sucks out and returns over the top here. What else have we got here? Just generic log manifold sort of things. I think I made one of them and Aaron made the other one. I don't know. I think I just made him do it because there's lots of die grinding involved, and I probably welded them, but he might have probably did all the hard work, which is picking bits of metal out of your shoes and stuff like that and out of your feet 2 hours later. So it's ghetto, but it works. As we've explained many times, you don't need 6 or 8 or 12 into 1 extractors into a turbo because it doesn't make any difference. A340 transmission. I think we rebuilt that, or had it rebuilt. I can't remember why, but and I can't even remember who did it. But it's been going for years, no dramas. This thing I think it made about 450 horsepower at the wheels, which is pretty standard for that size turbo on this sort of engine. and it's run 11.6 at 125, Pete, 125 mile an hour, which is pretty respectable, and it does it on those little tyres and a standard diff, and it looks like a Volvo on the outside, so it's kind of cool. I guess you would call it a sleeper, except everyone knows about it now, so we've ruined it. Custom tail shaft, standard diff, it's probably on its 4th diff. Just brakes, axles flat out. That's on the list. It's a Dana 30 or 31. So they are actually fitted to Jeeps, I think in the front. So you can buy parts for them. So we think it probably just needs a centre and some probably 28 or 31 spline axles, which we can have made. That's probably the best bet rather than trying to rear engineer it. This part of it's fine, it's just the axles twist off eventually. So it's going to get a new set of axles because this one's currently broken. Well, this one isn't. So we're preparing this for, what's it called, Pete? Drag?
The road trip.
The road trip, which is like a drag weekend or drag week style event where you drive between drag strips and compete. It's a bit of fun. It's always a good adventure. So we'll probably go along with Pete on that, and we'll obviously take a camera, so that might be a good one to watch. We've just replaced the engine, as I said, with a fresh one. The old engine, which was the second one, I think it's been in it, it's done a lot of hard work, and it's got no compression on one cylinder. We're going to pull that apart later and have a look and see what's wrong with it. He had an engine built by an engine shop in Brisbane somewhere. It's a pretty basic thing. It's just pistons, general rebuild, valve springs, head studs, and that's kind of all you really need. You don't even really need pistons, but of course he had one fail on the other engine, so he thought that would be a good idea. So we could probably throw a bit more power into it now. The Hoff is going to tune it. Once it's been running on the dyno, we'll see what happens. The problem is the more power it gets, the more the axles break, so it may stay sort of around the same power level, maybe a little bit more, depending on how Pete feels and whether he's had any lemon squashes at the time. Hopefully it will cooperate with the rest of the driveline. Otherwise, this thing is such a cracking performer and so ridiculously understated. It's probably the best car that Sweden ever produced would be this particular vehicle. I'm a big fan of them. They're actually really well built. They were very safe in the day, so basically they overdid everything. Brakes, chassis stiffness and that sort of thing. Everything except the engine, which was so completely underpowered it was ridiculous. Of course you could buy a V6 engine and put in them, which was also completely underpowered but used heaps of fuel. So there were some great options. V8 conversions, not a new thing in Volvos. They probably were doing it, you know, when they were 3 years old really. LSs are the big thing these days, and as with LSs, they fit, they're small, they work. Big thing in America. I don't remember why we put a 1 years in it. It was probably because we had one and we just used to do shit like that. So there it is, and it does work. And let's go and do some burnouts. Oh wait, we can't because it's only got one axle. See? Legit. By the way, Woody wasn't here, so if it's bad filming, blame David. And if it's poor content, blame me. Lemon squash?
Absolutely.
Oh, we better start it up. My mic sounds nice. What's this for?
Holds it real long. You can take it off if you want.
It's a giant zip tie.
Is it? Did you get that? Did you get that? That would be good. That would be for the end.
Walking